Hello and welcome to the new Montel Weekly Podcast. Joining me, Richard Sverrisson, is Olav Vilnes, the Nordic news editor at Montel. Welcome, Olav.
Hello. Today
we'll be talking about a very niche subject, the trading of renewable certificates or guarantees of origin. We'll hear a discussion between two key portfolio players in the market and myself that was recorded at an event in Amsterdam. But I thought, Olav, you could tell us a little bit more about the market before we go into the details and the technical nitty-gritty. Why is the guarantees of origin, or why are they important?
It's an interesting market. I mean, it's from a Norwegian perspective, I've always followed this market quite closely, but since Norway is the largest supplier of GOs into the market, I mean, you have a hydropower output in Norway up to 130 terawatt hour a year. Mm-hmm. So on a good year, they can provide a third of the GOs in the entire market, the Nordic region combined, with Norway definitely the biggest contributor.
Cover a third of the entire guarantees of origin.
The entire market, yeah, that's correct. And the main buyers will be countries like Germany, the Netherlands, where consumers want to buy renewables, want to show their customers or their own, if they're households, just to be sure that they feel that they use renewable energy.
So the rest of the market, that would be hydropower producers, say, in the Alpine area, or, can any wind turbine get a guarantee of origin, for example?
Yeah, historically, you could say that you have had two ways of supporting renewables. I mean, the traditional way is to subsidize the construction of renewables through feed-in tariffs or green certificates or whatever. That's a standard way of building renewables. But parallel to this, you've also had this voluntary market, guarantees of origin, where people are actually buying extra to just have the opportunity to call their own power consumption green. Mm-hmm. And in some areas that's required. I mean, on an EU level, if you want to have your household, if you, Richard, have at home, you have a declaration of what kind of power you use. Mm-hmm. And even if you live in Norway, you have 98% hydropower. You will be surprised when you look at your bill and they say it's like 40% coal or 20% nuclear and so on. And that is because they are actually buying out, they are selling out GOs to other countries, to customers in other countries, in a European-wide market.
So this is actually, for some, it's quite controversial.
It's very controversial, and I mean the industry up here hate it because
the heavy industry, the industry, the power, the buyers of the power,
the buyers of the power. I mean, they have, of course, they've always told their customers that we only use renewables. And then they have this mechanism that force them to pay extra to buy GOs, so they can tell them that they are renewable. And then, of course, if you are living in a country with no, or maybe surrounded by coal plants in the rural area or in Poland, for example, you can just buy these GOs, and then you say, okay, we just use renewables. That makes nonsense for a person up in northern Norway who is surrounded by hydropower plants.
Absolutely. We will come back to that a little bit later in the recording and some of the maybe the controversies surrounding the market. But are the prices of guarantees of origin, are they enough in and of themselves to support renewables, Olav?
They have never been, and they've always been very low. Historically, they've been like 20 euro cents per kilowatt hours, which is very low compared to the power price, which is more like 40-50 euros per megawatt hour. You have seen a sharp increase. Last year was a really strange year in that sense. I mean, you saw the price rise from €0.5 to €2.5 for Nordic hydropower for the GO price in just about 9 months.
Wow, what were the main drivers there?
There is two things. I mean, if you talk to analysts, they say there's an underlying growth that have been there for many years now. You have had like 7-8 years of double-digit growth in this market on the demand side, with supply failing to follow in the same pace. So in that sense, you've had a very strong demand rise, driven by companies who want to portray to the customer that they only use renewables.
Okay.
IKEA, Google, Apple, all these huge corporations, they have committed to the customers that we will only use renewables by 2020, 2030, or whatever target they have. And then they use, if they can't produce it themselves, they buy GOs to make sure that they can call their
to cover that any potential shortfall of own generation, own renewable generation, and their power use. Yeah.
That's correct. So I think that is the demand driver. And then you had, of course, also some supply issues last year with the drought in the Nordic region, which cut hydro supplies short. together with that, you had maybe speculators coming in, buying up, seeing prices going up, and exacerbating the sort of the increase there. For example, in the autumn, you had a price there of 2.40 euros for these GRs.
That's a substantial rise then.
Substantial rise, and it fell quite sharply later in the autumn.
Okay.
And you couldn't really see any big fundamental reason for such a sharp fall.
So it fell back from 240 to what?
To the almost to 41 euros.
Okay.
Early this year.
Early this year.
Yeah, and now even below 1 euro.
Okay. So now we're about 70, are we? Something like that?
70, 80 for the 2019 production.
What was the main driver for that fall in prices then?
Main driver for the fall is hard to tell. I think maybe it started to rain in the Nordic region in September that haven't contributed. Maybe you had this psychology that people came in there to saw that price. They won't continue rising. We should just sell off now. Maybe the new producers are coming in from Spain, Italy.
Okay, so that's what I've heard as well, that maybe some big companies from that part of the world sold off a lot of their production or their guarantees of origin.
And maybe they've been sitting on the fence as well. When prices were very low, wasn't that important to get rid of it. But then you had high prices and they all wanted to go into the market to sell off. And Spain is also a young market in this area, in this market. They came in 2016. So they've only been there for about 3 years.
Can we expect more of this kind of volatility this year, do you think?
Perhaps not as much as we had last year, but I think it will be a volatile market, definitely. The demand is still there, it's rising. The weather will always change, as we all know, and there are new countries coming in. You also have some issues that can affect the market, like Brexit, for example, can remove some demand if there's no deal, a no-deal Brexit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll watch closely the events going forward, and you can of course read more of our stories on the matter on Montel. So Olav, thank you very much for that explanation and the introduction here. As mentioned before, at a recent event in Amsterdam, I had a chance to look at the geo-markets from a perspective of two traders. Those listeners with a keen ear will be able to hear my Icelandic name slipping into the discussion at some point. Nicholas O'Keefe. Hello, Nicholas.
Hello.
He's from Danske Commodities, an expert in green markets, and also William Dixon from Agder Energy. William, hello.
Hi.
So we're at the REX Market Meeting Conference in Amsterdam, where all the talk is about guarantees of origin, renewable certificates, and how to decarbonise Europe. It's quite a niche market, though, Nicholas. This guarantees of origin. Could you explain it for the man on the street? What does this mean? What is a guarantee of origin, and why is it important, if it is?
Well, thank you for the good question, Stjórnur. I will try to do my best to answer that. Well, a guarantee of origin is an electricity attribute tracking instrument that makes it possible for electricity consumers to, in a compliant way, certify that their electricity consumption is produced by renewable energy in Europe. This is important because it creates transparency to the energy system. It also provides the possibility of being able to prioritize between different options, so from a consumer perspective, between different offerings. But on a higher level, it also helps policymakers in tracking their efforts to transition the energy system from fossil-based energy for electricity to more of a renewable
system. And would you concur with that, William?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, certainly in the past few years with the whole human disclosure initiatives and the rise of the ethical consumer, I think we see a lot of people choosing, where they want to be able to document their consumption is from, and a lot of different preferences around Europe, a lot of different, let's say, tastes. I mean, of course there are fossil and there is nuclear issuance as well, and people like to say consume this volume, but also renewables, different types. Do you have a preference in wind? Do you have a country specific thing? Do you have an age specific thing? So, we start seeing above documenting consumption being renewable, then you start getting the different layers of demand within the system. So, I think for everybody, it's a good thing for documenting what they're looking for.
I want to go a little bit about the market dynamics. I mean, the talk here and the talk generally was about last year and what happened last year. Prices rose and now they've fallen back. Can you explain a little bit why, Nicholas?
Well, I would explain the rapid increase in prices and the rapid decrease in price to the fact that there is somewhat lacking liquidity in the market.
Mm-hmm.
There could be different reasons for this, but when you put the market into the context of the fundamentals, there is nothing really fundamental in terms of change in supply or demand during that time, which would cause such a increase in price, up to 700% increase in price over that span of time.
From what to what?
It more or less sort of started start of last year, so in 2018.
At what price level, and where did it finish?
Well, I mean, now...
Or where did it peak?
Yeah,
maybe?
you know, basically when we discuss prices, it's wholesale prices, so the amounts are substantial when you trade them through the wholesale market. And it's also hard to give it indexed price, and indexation of prices is one of the elements to support this market in the future. But without such, it's difficult to pinpoint exact prices. But you could generally say that the prices in the wholesale market for GOs were between 20 euro cents up to maybe 30-35 euro cents, depending on, as Dixon said previously, on the different type of products, etc.
Well, they peaked at 35 euro cents, and they peak around 2 euros.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now they've come down to 20 to 35. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends also on what you talk about in regards to whether it's with spot delivery of certificates, or if you are discussing bilateral forward contracts.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, is this? Would you also concur with that? Would you agree that it's a lack of liquidity here, William?
I mean, it's an interesting one, because if we take, say, the fundamental situation last year, I mean, we started the year, was it like maybe an average spread of maybe 52, 54 cents at the beginning of 2018, and that had risen up from 30 cents rather for the previous year, and then I think we peaked. There was a very strong correlation last year between the hydrological balance in the Nordics and then the geo price. So I think let's say the peak of the deficit, if you will, on the Nordic hydro was maybe, I think it was week 42, maybe week 37, somewhere around there. But that was also when the peak of the geo prices was. And of course, you're setting forward prices on the resource available. And we were having, let's say, one of the driest years ever, I think, or maybe not ever, but certainly
in recent memory, anyway.
In recent memory, yeah. I mean, don't remember too far back, but there was a few people saying it was one of the driest years that they could remember.
Since 2011.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can't remember anything back beyond then, anyway. No.
Yeah. So no, but you kind of base the prices on the fundamentals which are currently available, and if you're experiencing dry conditions, you're experiencing low reservoir levels, then there's an element of like, well, how much have I forward sold? And how much have I forward sold, and how much do I need to buy back because my assets are not going to generate enough? So at what point do people start potentially panic and thinking, okay, maybe I need to get some volume back? But then you're thinking, okay, well, if the resource is this low at the moment, if it's going to be snowing at the end of the year, is snow going to come? And then when it does snow, is it going to remain as snow on the mountainside? What is the delay? I mean, let's say if you take wind, for example, the generation is pretty instant, but then with hydro, there's quite a delay. And then what is that lag? And at what point have you got obligations to deliver? What are your commitments versus what is your deficit reduction at the moment? I think anyone certainly within a Nordic generation portfolio would have seen a little bit of a reduction in forecast towards the end of last year.
So you're sort of saying there are clear fundamental reasons for the upturn, certainly that we saw towards the sort of...
I would say, yeah. I mean, and then since then we've had a few, let's say, different things which have come to the surface. Okay, yes, there was a bit of strong rainfall within in the Nordics and in Q3. We've had a few court cases with certificates from outside the EECS area, different levels of demand, different countries purchase at different times of the year. And when a lot of these, like say, stars align, it can make the price go down. If someone looks out the window and sees it raining and say, "Oh well, it's raining," then therefore the price should go down. Then that drives the market in some instances.
I agree with Dixon, and when you also take the fundamentals and look at the liquidity factor of the market, then it's like you leverage the whole market. So
could you explain that a bit?
So coming back to the liquidity, meaning you have a dry season in Norway, so certificates have got 12 months sort of expiring, and this in a sense means that you've got 12 months to use those certificates to kind of cover your consumption the last 12 months. So that somewhat reduces the fundamental seasonality on both the demand and the supply side, as you would expect year on year to be somewhat manageable. But it's true that, that is what we also saw, coupled with the fact that there was low wind in many places of Europe, really drew up the prices, which would have done anyhow. That would have increased the prices, let's say, in proportion to the real effect of that on the fundamental demand and supply. But meaning that you could expect a price increase, but not maybe 700%.
Yeah, that's a bit...
And what explains this is the liquidity. And the liquidity comes in two forms. It comes in the form of certain market cycle, maturation, saturation if you have. And then it comes in the form of being blood for pricing of the product. And from a saturation point of view, and exactly like this, how Dixon explained, that when producers all of a sudden see that they've gone short, then all hell breaks loose, like what it showed last year. But saturation is more that, and we don't have the transparency to fully understand it, but it could be simply, I've been in this market for a number of years now, that the fundamental demand side has been already saturated through or answered with forward contracts. So what remains as liquidity in the market is more or less the delta between the supply and the demand. For the rest of it, in regards to baseload, now geos represent about 35% of the total production of renewable energy, electricity in Europe. So you have a certain way to go to fully reach the ceiling. But until then, the liquidity is the main driver for prices, not vice versa.
Okay. And William, you would say, or Dixon, maybe I should call you.
Been called worse.
What would you say are the things to look out for this year? I mean, are the same aspects going to be driving prices?
I mean, if let's say, I think if you look at the geo issuance in recent years and you take renewable, I think it was like maybe 68% of the renewable issuance was hydro, and 50% of that is Nordic. So I think there's a strong correlation between what is happening in the Nordics. But then the thing you can't accommodate is for what is the rate of new stations, new generation coming to the market. We hear a lot of stories about subsidy-free developments, but then that potentially nets off the demand of somebody else, and then France will bring volume to the market, but that's only going to start coming to auction by the end of the year. Spain came into the market in 2016, had a great year on hydro, and that was down 43% or something like this on production. So this all kind of starts throwing into the mix.
But in terms of solar, it's going to be a big growth market.
Yeah,
Spain.
I mean, in one way, solar will come to the market, but if you look at countries, I think Netherlands has increased massively on solar, but it's still kind of small volumes compared to the overall thing. Again, it depends what people's demand is. I mean, will we see an increase in the next year in the demand for nuclear volumes based on it being, let's say, carbon free or something like this? People start looking for other opportunities. Okay, yes, renewable is one thing, but then this whole kind of, let's say, blue energy transition, as some people are starting to talk about.
I mean, there's a lot of you touched on it earlier about the variance between some geos and others in the price.
Yeah.
What explains that? Why are geos from Dutch wind? Why are they more expensive than Icelandic hydropower?
I think locality has got to do with that case in particular, but for the rest of it, where you see price differences is between technologies, and that's where it becomes all a bit fuzzy. We joke about it that one reason why wind certificates, given that the supply is equal for both, reflects in a higher price, is because those companies that are willing to pay the price for them to use for promotions for their products and services find it more aesthetically pleasing to have a picture of a windmill on their homepage than a solar panel.
Or a hydro turbine.
Or any other reason. But there are many reasons.
But it's part of this, the sort of local is good feeling that you get in just standard consumer products, whether it be beer or potatoes or meat or whatever. The same thing applies to renewable energy.
And as long as the windmill is built behind the garden of your neighbour and you can buy the certificates from the windmill, then everyone's happy, right?
Okay,
Not in my backyard.
but close enough so I can get the guarantee of origin.
I mean, that's it. I mean, you look at Germany, they're kind of doing the same model. It's a kind of like, the regional product. But at what stage does a regional product? At what point would you go for something cheaper elsewhere? There's a lot of variables to consider, and the Icelandic argument has long been discussed, and some people say it's not their preference because it's not physically connected to Europe. And
there's a criticism of the whole geo market that.
I mean, technically, a geo from Iceland can't be, let's say, physically exported, but you can use it to document consumption in Cyprus if you wanted to.
So some people find that they have a problem with that because it's not
Yeah, but it's I guess it's like charity, right? It's about choice, and you through charity voluntarily send off some money to support a social responsible project somewhere. You don't necessarily need to import the whole project to your house. And it also stems from the fact where this is really not a sort of a issue, is that it's about emissions in the end of the day. And
global emissions.
Yes, you can't really have them local unless you live in a water balloon.
Well, precisely, Nicholas. Thank you for that. Thank you for that lovely metaphor there. The bigger picture is that we're trying to decarbonise, and that we're, the bigger picture is more important than where the guarantee of where the renewable power was generated.
Exactly. I mean, ultimately, this is the aim, and then you start seeing, like in recent times, when the price gets to a certain level, does someone, you don't want to say become not bothered, but when do they not want to go for the GO? And then maybe you start going for, let's say, not cheaper products, but traditionally biomass has been a product which has not really been in demand. But when wind and hydro were soaring in price, biomass was getting sold out. People wanted to be green, but they were just willing to kind of go, okay, well, let's go for the biomass. And at what point does someone, there's potentially a lot of demand coming in the next few years if you believe what you read. There's electrification of all sorts of things. Transport is going to come in, by certain dates. Norway is going to be flying electric planes. All of this, if it's going to be documented by, GOs, is going to have an impact. So at what point do people start, forward selling and going for that? And do you go for an expensive hydro? Okay, biomass is under a little bit of debate in the future years, but whether that's there's a case going on at the moment about biomass being
the sustainability criteria.
A portion of biomass not being renewable, but then at certain points, do you find someone that says, well, if that part of biomass isn't renewable, then why is the rest of it is renewable? And then the consumer influences start coming in, and we'll see how things, I think, develop.
Consumer choice becomes quite important there. Technology can play a part as well, can it not, in tracking where the energy comes from? I know there's some blockchain projects which would aid to be able to track where the, say, megawatt hour or kilowatt hour was produced and where it was transported and where it was ended up being consumed. Would that provide more transparency to this market, Nicholas?
But I don't think it would really help in supporting one of the roles of GOs, which is reducing anxieties about things.
Okay, can you explain a bit more? Whose anxiety? Your anxiety or market anxiety?
No, but I mean general anxiety on those that buy GOs in many cases because of their concern in regards to climate change.
Okay. So it wouldn't change that?
No, I don't. I think, there are still too many questions that remain unanswered in regards to the integrity of the system, in regards to whether it will make the current system more effective or more transparent or somehow bring more value to the table. And that, hopefully, but I don't see that right now.
How about you?
I mean, people have been speaking, of course, about the whole blockchain for a couple of years now, and you can try and follow it, and it seems to be something that people kind of want the GOs to kind of go into, but they haven't quite worked out how it's going to work. And I think CertiQ have been working with something to try and make it work. Some of the large consumers have also been looking at blockchain solutions.
Who's that? Who did you say?
The Dutch registry.
CertiQ.
And at the end of the day, do you see what is going to be the impact of let's say a blockchain scenario? I mean, if I wanted to deal with Nicholas, then we just do it and no questions asked, and then we're bringing in potentially another platform, I don't know. Where does... It'd be interesting to see how it comes out.
Maybe with blockchain, I will never again have the opportunity to sit down with him to drink a beer.
And who won't? That's a shame.
Exactly. It'll be done. That would be a complete disaster.
May as well go home.
Early.
No, that would be a shame.
William, you also mentioned Spain, and we've talked about different markets. Where do you think of the growth market? I mean, there's a lot of talk about PPAs. Maybe where's the potential? Where's the potential here? I mean, Germany is coming to the end of its feed-in tariffs, or some of the plants will be. Would that provide when their subsidies end? Then they will be able to generate GOs, and would that boost the supply in the market?
Potentially. Supply at the moment, let's say, for example, Lithuania joined last year, but it was only on an import-only basis. So they have generation which is currently technically not been exported. Greece has been in the rumours for a while. The UK has been for a while, but then, Brexit might impact this. Portugal is also there, but also Poland is there. There's a lot of nations here which have technically got demand. And it's always a case of what comes first in a scenario. It's the generation comes to the market before the demand comes, and then you've got to it becomes a process of not education, because that sounds like condescending, but you just get people on board with the geo mechanism, and then Germany, it could impact it. 2020 winter, or did we say today 2021, wind turbines start coming to the market. But then you start asking yourself, well, are those turbines going to get knocked down and built again to get the new, let's say, rate of incentive? Or at what point does someone say, okay, I would like to buy 21-year-old German wind? So, what is the preference of the consumer as well?
Well, maybe they will more willing to buy it if it stands behind the neighbor's garden and you can buy it locally.
But not on the blockchain.
Well, maybe. If you don't like your neighbor and you don't want to have a beer with him.
That's the perfect solution then. If there was one thing, guys, if I can just round up, if there's one thing you'd like to see, one change in the market, what would you like to see happen in the market that you're very active, you're very knowledgeable about?
For me, it would be when you see a price, a volume associated with it. Because I think, we see a lot of prices. I don't think you need to be a wizard to effectively try and coordinate a Friday closing price, which would get published around Europe. And, you could sell 3 GOs and make that happen. So I think, what's important to see is the volume behind the price. A terawatt could get sold at €1, and if 3 GOs get traded at 20 cents, unfortunately, it's the 20 cents which gets reported, and I think there needs to be a bit of consistency there.
So this is a request maybe for those people putting prices on screens and to back it up, the price with the volumes there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
mentioning no names, but people know where, let's say, potential flaws are in terms of someone can show a price and say, well, this happened, but what was the volume behind it? And if it's 1 GO, then is it a valid reference?
Absolutely. How about you, Nicholas?
I think for this kind of market to be able to mature so that it can create greater value for everyone involved is that it also needs to focus more on providing end users, the ones that actually cover their consumption with GOs, more transparency in regards to how their money is being used. Because I think one of the value drivers potentially for this market is the willingness of consumers and paying households and companies to pay for these products. And I think that their willingness to pay increases the more transparent the market becomes in regards to what effect over time their money
not just funding you and William's beer at these events.
Well,
put the expenses in next week.
Yeah.
But I take it.
Yeah, that's the only reason we're thirsty man.
We're in
don't think I can claim this one.
Well, I think I'll leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much for illuminating this market and clarifying some issues. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you very much,
Pleasure.
William.
And that's all for today. For more energy news, go to montelnews.com or follow us on Twitter. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.